Welcome back, everybody, to more from the Sableyes. I'm here tonight with Jordan. How's it going, Jordan?
Quite well, Mitch.
That's good. Back from the European Internationals, and we're here with something new, something that we've not done before. A series, or kind of an idea, where we're going to start building some decks in front of people. This will be building Reshiram Charizard, because it's all well and good to sit down and do a deck profile, but sometimes people don't quite know how to build a deck or why decisions have been made, so we thought it would be a good idea, Jordan.
Yeah, I think it's a especially interesting deck to have a look at with this new format, because there's a lot of different ways to build Reshiram Charizard. I've seen so many different variants, and I think they've all got pros and cons.
Yeah, so obviously we're going to start off with some Reshiram Charizard, because it's a good card. It's a good attacker, and like the way I kind of think about decks when I'm building them is obviously you start off with the thing that is going to win you the game, and Reshiram Charizard is the thing that's going to win you the game. Flare Strike is just a busted attack. I'd say
yeah,
probably...
and obviously...
Oops, sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, obviously it's the main Pokemon of the deck, and then the biggest question comes around what are the supporting cards that you want to play alongside Reshiram Charizard to make sure it actually works properly.
Yeah, 100%. So we're probably going to play 3 of them. With tag teams, you don't necessarily need to play 4 of unless you want to start at like Pheromosa Buzzwole or something like that. But I think we probably want to start another Pokemon, Jordan, that you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, and that is Volcanion. Because this card is perfect support. You just have to ignore the mixed arts for a moment, because the set's only just come out and I haven't got regular ones on PTCGO yet. But with Flare Starter, we can start accelerating the way that we attach energy to Reshiram Charizard. Since ReshiZard has an attack cost of 4, we want to get energy on there quickly, so Volcanion's probably the best support Pokemon we have to do that.
Yeah, obviously the second attack, High Heat Blast, is also pretty decent. It's good at taking down other popular non-EXs such as Zapdos, but overall I think Volcanion's a much more controversial card count in this list, because obviously Reshiram is almost always going to be a 3-of, but depending on how heavy you go into Volcanion, it can be as heavy as a 4-of like we've done here, but it can also only be a 1 or 2-of and still work fine.
Yeah, like we've gone for the 4-of because Flare Starter, we want to be using that if we go second, so you want to increase the amount of outs you have to hitting that Volcanion turn 1, and if you've got 4 of a card, then you're more likely to start it. And obviously, High Heat Blast, like you said, is a pretty good secondary attack. Doing 110 is nothing to sneeze at. So it's not a bad secondary attacker either. But that's kind of where the simplicity of the Pokemon line kind of stops, Jordan, because there's a number of different ways we could go about building ReshiZard. We could leave it here and just start building like with supporters and stuff. We could go with like Flareon GX, or we could go with like a Turbo Salazzle type of deck. And it really depends on how we want to get these ReshiZards powered up.
Yeah, I think that Salazzle is one of the cards that I'm most interested in when it comes to building Reshiram Charizard. It just seems like one of the strongest abilities in this deck in general. But at the same time, I also feel like Flareon just adds so much to the deck. In fact, its attack is almost just another version of Volcanion's first attack, but in some ways better.
Yeah, so Heat Stage does damage and then attaches 3 energy from hand, so you have to have them, but I don't think we're going to have a problem having them. Heat Stage doing an extra bit of pressure damage can maybe help those like odd numbers that you need to hit, because with ReshiZard and Volcanion, I don't know about you, Jordan, but I always feel like I'm hitting 10 less damage than I need to. Like Flare Strike does 230, but Pika Rom's got 240. Feverish Explosion does 110, but things like Hooper and Zapdos and Dugong especially, Zapdos has 110, so I don't know why I'm saying it. Does that have 110? Yeah, it has 110.
Yes.
But like it can't hit one hit KO a Dugong. It can't one hit KO a Hooper. So Heat Stage could help us out there. The problem with that is that it would be another GX. So we need to make a decision about whether we want to have another secondary attacker that can help accelerate energy, and obviously Flareon has a really good second attack. Bright Flame for 190 is really good. It means that you don't always have to be in ReshiZard, and Power Burner GX is also pretty good as well, because you're going to be burning lots of fire energy throughout the game, and to be able to just drop down a Flareon and Power Burner in the late game is a really good move. It depends.
I actually think that Power Burner is one of my favorite things about that card overall, because one of the things that can be a problem for this deck is closing out a game if you lose a Charizard unexpectedly, and all of a sudden you don't have the energy you need to win the game. You can just use a Flareon with 1 fire energy. You just lost a bunch of energy for being knocked out, so it's a pretty good way to close out the game if you're struggling to have a decent board.
100%. And then on the other hand, we could pick Salazzle as our kind of extra support Pokemon. With Roast Reveal, being able to trade a fire energy for 3 cards means that you're going to really rip through your deck. So it kind of comes down to whether we want to have that extra support in Flareon, or whether we want the extra consistency that Salazzle's going to offer. I don't think that we can afford to have 4 Volcanion and both of these Pokemon in our deck. It seems like it's going to get a little bit too cluttered.
Well, one thing that I was just thinking about is if we do choose to play the Flareon GX, say a 2-2 Flareon for example, that means we can probably cut down the Volcanion down to 2 copies, because Flareon serves a very similar purpose to Volcanion in searching for energy at the beginning of the game. So I think if we do play the Flareon build, we'd probably cut down on Volcanion for space.
That's true. So what do you think, Jordan? I'm kind of leaning towards Salazzle because I like to go fast, but I can see the merit to Flareon, and it means that we can also open up a little bit more space with those Volcanion, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I think at the moment maybe we'll keep both in mind, just leave them for now, and Salazzle I think will come down to how we end up building the trainer line, because obviously there's a few different ways to build the trainers. You can go over Green Search Engine or other various ways of building the trainers. I think Salazzle is a very strong card, depending on how we build the trainer line, but if we choose to go for a different direction, then Salazzle loses a bit of value.
Yeah, no worries. Well, what I'll do is I'll just leave them both in there for the moment, and we're probably going to have a 2-2 line of both, and that way we can just come back and cut them later. One of the things that Jordan and I tend to do when we're building decks together, and we do that a little bit, is we just put in all the cards that we want and then cut them back later. So I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being like a 75 card list and then we have to cut it back, but you know, it is what it is.
Yeah, but other than that, as for Pokemon, I think we've got most of the core Pokemon. There are a bunch of other Pokemon, like support Pokemon you could play. You could obviously play Lele GX, you could play Let Loose Marsha, as well as a bunch of other useful cards.
Like Dedenne, you could play like another... You could play all sorts of stuff. There's heaps of options. Yeah,
but in terms of other attackers, the only other one that really comes to mind that would be worth considering is maybe the new Turtonator. Have you had much of a think about that card, Mitch?
Oh, I have. I think it's a good card. I don't actually know if I have it online. There you go, I've got 2 of them. We'll put him in there. He's really interesting in that he just gives you another option. Like it's kind of a different direction to the Flareon GX attack, but if you've got heaps of energy on the board, which you can do with fire decks like Volcanion, Accelerating Energy, Flareon, and Welder, and all these things, Explosive Jet 50 times the amount of energy on the field, discard, that you discard can really quickly expand to huge amounts of damage, and the fact that it's a basic non-GX is a really positive move for it. I really like this card. It just depends whether we can keep the energy there.
It's almost exactly the same as good old Blacephalon GX's attack, actually. It's slightly more expensive, being a non-GX, but in terms of damage output, it's identical to Blacephalon GX. And the one thing that I really like about Turtonator is if we see any of those annoying Bronzong decks that stop you from attacking with fire Pokemon, you can use Turtonator, being a dragon type, to get around anything like that.
100%. And it also powers up your Flareon GX attack as well, because you're putting heaps of energy in the bin to take a big knockout, and then you can take another big knockout the next turn with Flareon. So I don't mind that at all. That seems pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's worth keeping in mind. Maybe it's just a one-off if we have space for it. We'll see how we go, I suppose.
No worries. I reckon for the moment we might leave the Pokemon line. We'll see if anything else comes up, because I think, like you said, the most important thing that we really need to think about is how we're going to build our trainer line.
For sure.
So I'm going to start us off on a limb and say we probably want to play 4 copies of Welder, because attaching fire energy is pretty good. And I'd also think...
pretty good.
I'd also think we might want to play a few of these as well. This, I think, is probably the best supporter that comes out of this set. Green's Exploration, not Search. Since we're not playing that many Pokemon that have abilities, Green's Exploration is going to be active for us most of the time. In fact, the only Pokemon, like if we choose not to play Salazzle, the only Pokemon that will have abilities is Energy Evolution Eevee, which theoretically we can get rid of straight away with a Fire Energy to evolve it into Flareon. So I don't mind 4 of those either.
And even if we do play the Salazzle, the fact that Salandit doesn't have an ability means that Green Search is always a good card at the beginning of the game.
Yeah. So these 4, those 2 supporters, I think are both pretty solid 4-ofs. What other support cards do you reckon we should do? Because obviously, like, there's Lily, Cynthia, Guzma, all sorts of stuff. I reckon...
Yeah, obviously, Guzma is a card that we're going to be playing at least 2 to 4 at least. I don't think it'd be a one-off count, but anywhere between 2 to 4 seems fine. But the other main supporter I see people talking about in this deck is Kiawe. I've had a lot of conversations to whether it's worth playing Kiawe or not. Obviously, Kiawe is stronger if Tapu Lele is in the deck. Obviously, you don't want to play Tapu Lele and Greens in the same deck realistically, but if you are choosing to play Tapu Lele, then Kiawe becomes a very strong card because Volcanian's attack only works to its full potential going second.
Yeah.
And Kiawe's a supporter you want to play if you go first, so it's kind of the best of both worlds.
Here's the thing, we don't necessarily need to play Tapu Lele because we could just use Pokegear? I think that's what it's called. So we could, if we put 4 Pokegear in, that's kind of like playing it's a Great Ball for supporters. So that might give us an out to get into one of those Kiawe early without having to waste a bench slot on a Tapu Lele. So that might be a decent inclusion, I'd imagine.
I think the Pokegear is actually really strong in this deck because the way this deck's kind of naturally built, especially if we're playing the Salazzle, is you don't really want to be using draw supporters too often. You want to either use Welder almost every turn, or you want to Guzma knock something out and use your Salazzle to draw cards, or your Heat Factory to draw cards. So having the 4 Pokegear kind of makes up for not playing cards like Lele.
Yeah, I reckon you're right. Now, there's lots of fire-based cards that we probably also want to include. My first one that I'm jumping towards is Fiery Flint. I reckon that's at least a 3 of, because being able to search out those energy in combination with Welder is really, really good. Means you can greens for it turn 1, and then you've got the Welder and the Flint for the next turn, which can be very, very good. So I reckon that's a pretty solid inclusion. And I'd also say that Fire Crystal is probably some way to go as well. I'll put all of these in at 4, but I reckon we might be able to cut some of them down a little bit. But I reckon both of those cards seem pretty good. Fire Crystal especially if we're playing Salazzle.
Yeah, I think both of those cards obviously get stronger with the Salazzle line. As soon as you can turn your Fire Energy into draw, the Fire Energy become a lot stronger than if they're just there for Welder purposes. I could, as you said, see either or both of those cards being cut down to 3. We'll see how we go for space, but especially with the Salazzle line, they are strong as a 4 count.
Yeah, 100%. Now, we probably also want to be able to search for Pokemon. It's odd that we didn't go for these ones first. We probably want to use Ultra Ball. We'll just chuck that in at a 4 count. And Nest Ball as well is probably a good option. I think pretty much everything.
I would say that Nest Ball is probably actually stronger than Ultra Ball in this deck overall.
I was just about to say, almost everything, if we don't play Salazzle, everything is a basic, apart from Flareon, which we can just search with a fire anyway. So
I could almost see Ultra Ball being cut down to less than a 4-off count potentially, just because we've already got 4 Fiery Flint for discarding options, and that's one of the main benefits to Ultra Ball is being able to pin cards out of your deck. We've already got that purpose solved with another card.
That's true. And, well, here's the thing. We could include, obviously we're going to include Heat Factory, and Heat Factory might just be enough to get that, that Salazzle draw without needing to use Salazzle, which means that Ultra Ball, again, is probably not necessarily useful.
It is still important just because, obviously, you do need a way to search for Salazzle. You can't just play no search for it at all, but it probably doesn't need to be a 4-of, considering you can green search for Ultra Ball just to get your Salazzle out. And once you've got Salazzle out, obviously green search is not really important anymore. It doesn't work. Then you're going to be relying on your Fire Energy for draw for the rest of the game.
Alright, well I think we've got all of the really, really easy inclusions. But now let's start thinking about what we'd expect to see. And I think the big one that we need to worry about, obviously apart from the mirror, is Zoroark Dugong. I rate that deck really, really highly. Is there anything that you can think of, Jordan, that might be a decent inclusion to help us deal with that?
Yeah, there are a few cards that come to mind. One of the obvious ones is cards like Altar of the Sun or Weakness Policy, just to remove your water weakness. But I think a better tech is actually maybe a card like a Max Potion, which you can search for with greens, and that of course will kind of mitigate one of their Dugong snipes. And the other card, obviously, you've got on the screen there is Power Plant. It's pretty good as well.
Yeah, I was going for this one straight away. Zoroark Dugong without its abilities seems like something that we might want to do, so I'll include that. But I like your Max Potion idea. That's something that I haven't seen a lot of in Reshiram Charizard. I'll just put it in as a one-off for now so we don't forget it. But yeah, to mitigate that snipe and to help heal off your damaged ReshiZard would be really good. Because we've got Welder, we can still attach 3 and then get a one-shot on one of their Zoroarks if we want to. So,
and I actually think that the Max Potion is even stronger since we're playing the Flareon build, because we can either Max Potion not only to increase the damage of Flareon's GX attack, but we could also just retreat a damaged Reshiram, Max Potion it off, and then use, say, a Fire Crystal and just catch all those energy again using Flareon.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. So we'll leave that there so we don't forget it. Power Plant I've put in as a 2 count, but you can probably... I can see that going either way. It's not going to be any more than 3, but it's probably not going to be that high. Okay, what else? One of the problems...
Well, we're missing Choice Band, which is a pretty important card for another big deck, being Pikachu Zekrom. You definitely need that extra damage to be able to deal with Pikachu and Zekrom GX. If you don't have Choice Band, then that matchup becomes a lot worse.
Yeah, so we need to be able to do 240. What are the other numbers that we need to hit? Like 210, 240. We need to be able to deal with the mirror somehow. Like, I can see us, obviously Turtonator's an option in the mirror, because we could, like, discard, like, 5 energy with a Choice Band to knock it out. Maybe a Flareon's an option, potentially. Not really, though. Because 20, you need to have a silly amount.
Another supporter card I don't mind, which is especially useful in the mirror match, is Professor Kukui, which is actually even stronger if we're playing Salazzle. Obviously, once Salazzle is in play, then it kind of shuts off Green Search, and all of a sudden we're going to be wanting to use cards like Kukui in the late game more so than Green's Exploration.
Yep, that's true. Well, Kukui solves our problem there, but like you said, it would probably be a better choice with Salazzle than anything else, because we want to be able to draw into it since it's a low count. We're not playing 4 Kukui. Probably play 2 at the most, I'd imagine. So we want to make sure that we can, we want to make sure that we can get into it. Any other matchups that we would expect to see that we might need to deal with? I'm thinking, like, obviously if we play the Turtonator and the Flareon, we don't lose as hard to things like Naganadel Quagsire, which has been getting a lot of hype. That's still going to be a really tough matchup. Stall is also something that's going to be around. I imagine we probably have a reasonable matchup against Stall. Like, if we've got Fall Canyon, we could probably just attack with that in Stall and not worry about anything else. Are there anything that's jumping out at you?
Good. I mean, obviously the Volcanions and the Turtonator are always just good cards against realistically any non-GX matchups. Things such as Zapdos or Lost March, those are cards that you're going to want to attack with for most of those matchups. And then when it comes to GX matchups, we're already doing enough damage to knock out like any GX other than other Reshiram Charizards, and that's what we've got the Kukui for, obviously. I'm just thinking of other tools that we could potentially use to swing matchups. Cards like Weakness Policy or maybe even Wishful Baton aren't bad options to have.
Yep, for
I don't know if they're better than Voice Band, but they're certainly worth considering, I feel.
Well, we'll stick them on there if I can find them. So there's Weakness Policy. I'll just put one in just so we don't forget, and the other one, Wishful Baton. Obviously, Weakness Policy. Yes, I understand that we've got more than 60 cards. Weakness Policy really helpful in a deck where obviously everyone's going to be targeting you. You're playing Reshiram Charizard in the first week that it's legal. Everyone's going to be playing something that they reckon can beat Reshiram Charizard. So Weakness Policy can kind of mitigate that. It's how people kind of, when Pigazek came out, they were kind of like, oh, we're gonna play fighting to beat it, and some people got around it by playing Weakness Policy. And Wishful Baton also very good because we can keep the energy in play, which makes it easier for things like Turtonator to attack. easier for our other ReshiZards to attack as well. So both worth considering. Any other cards you can think of that we might use? I reckon like things like Switch probably aren't a bad idea.
I think Switch, especially with the Greens engine, is a very important card. Probably need to play at least 2 in any combination of Switch and Escape Rope just to be able to Greens for, say, a Nest Ball and a Switch turn 1. Always be able to get out into that Volcanion as soon as possible.
Yeah,
is pretty important.
It's a pretty solid idea.
And I think that's pretty much all we'll probably need for the trainer line. I don't think we're missing anything too important.
Like you could be wild, like if you're playing greens and like get some crazy stuff. But I reckon that's probably all the stuff that's jumping out at me. Let's leave that for a moment. Let's go into energy now. We're just playing fire energy, and the question is how many. Now in the past, decks like Volcanion have played like 13. But I kind of want to just stick it up to 15, just to be safe. And we can always cut them down. I don't think you're ever going to need any more than that. Like, in fact,
I've seen a lot of variants in how many Fire Engine I've been seeing lists. I've seen as low as 12 to 16, I think is the highest I've seen in a list. So it can be anywhere within that range, but it's always going to be a pretty decently high count.
Yeah, and 15 is probably a safe place to start. I can see us getting down to like, it depends on the build we're running. Like obviously, if we run with Salazzle, then we want more because we want to be using it to draw as well as attach. I think the important thing is we want to figure out if we're going to use Flareon, because if we're going to use Flareon, that'll indicate the amount of energy that we need, because we want the GX attack to be able to do specific numbers, right? So obviously, since there's 20 damage for every fire energy in the bin, if we play 15. That means we can do 280 with that attack, presuming that every fire energy apart from the one that we've attached is in the bin.
And I mean, obviously, you're not going to always need to get all those fire energy in the discard. I imagine with 15, at least 11 or 12 is pretty reliable amount to get in the discard if you're going for it. And that's enough to do 240, knock out most Pokemon in the format, 270 with a choice band.
Yeah.
So obviously, the higher energy count works pretty well with either Flareon or Salazzle.
Yeah, it works with both.
Either of those cards dislike having a high energy count. I imagine that we can probably get away with as low as 13, though. I think any less than 13 is probably pushing it to play either of these cards, but I think 13 would probably work fine. Obviously, we've got cards like Fire Crystal to reuse them as well.
Yeah. Alright, so now we're at the hard part of building a deck. We've got 78 cards at the moment that we would like to play if we could. But we're not going to be able to play all of them. We're going to need to make some hard choices. Now, I think we need to start off with the type of build we're going to play. Like, are we playing with Flareon and Turtonator and Salazzle, which means cutting Volcanions, or are we going to just go like hard Volcanion, ReshiZard, and maybe Kiawe into the energy that we need early game? What do you think is the correct way to go? Obviously, there's no right way, but what's the best way to go right at the moment?
I feel like with the list we've been building so far, I think that it kind of works better overall without the Salazzle, focusing a bit more on the Flareon, just because of the fact we've gone full Green Search, and we're playing a lot of item cards that you really want to have Green Search active towards the end of the game as well. So yes, Salazzle is a good card to draw cards throughout the game. Greens kind of means that you don't need that constant draw throughout the game anyway. And
we've also got Heat Factory as well, so we can always greens for Heat Factory to give us a little bit of extra draw if we need it. This isn't to say that Salazzle isn't going to see play in ReshiZard, because it 100% will. But let's just, for the sake of argument, remove it and focus more on this Flareon Turtonator build. You were saying before that if we were going to play Flareon, we probably don't need to focus as hard on Volcanion. What do you say we cut one of these as well?
I think you can cut either one or two. We'll see how we go for space, but cutting at least one, I think, makes total sense.
Yeah, I think we
cut
one.
Probably even consider cutting a Turtonator as well.
Yeah, I think that's probably not a bad idea, because we're only ever going to really attack with that once, and once is probably enough. We'd probably stick with the 2-2 Flareon line, and ReshiZard is still obviously a man attacker, so we'll leave it at that for now. But if we're going with the Flareon Volcanion style build, do we need Kiawe? Or is that the next logical place to find cuts?
I think that's one of the next logical places to find cuts, because we've got playing two different ways of basically pulling off a Kiawe turn 1 anyway, using Flareon or Volcanion. I do think that if we are going to play it, it definitely won't be a 3 count at the very least.
Yeah. I think that if we were going with the Salazzle version, that Kiawe would potentially be better. Just because we're not going to give ourselves the opportunity to draw. Well, I mean, we don't need to draw into it any time other than turn 1 anyway, so I don't know what I'm rambling on about. But with the acceleration that we've got, I don't think we really need it here. I'm happy to cut it, are you?
Yep, I think that's fine.
Let's get rid of that.
That means we could even maybe consider bumping Guzma up to a 4 count if we were to cut the Kiawe. I think that's not a bad thing to consider as well.
Alright, well let's put it up to 4. We are on 70 cards, so let's keep looking.
Another card that we can easily cut, I think, or at least cut down on, now that we've cut Salazzle, is the Ultra Ball, because obviously Nest Ball finds pretty much literally every card,
yeah. So
if it doesn't get his Flareon.
I feel really weird going down any further than 3. I feel like we still want to have some, but I could see 2, maybe.
I think 2's fine.
Okay, we'll go with 2. Gives us something, but yeah, Nest Ball obviously gets us everything now, so we're not super worried. I feel like that extra power plant's jumping out at me as one that we might not need. We'll leave it for the moment. Let's have a look down here. We've got lots of tools down here. Wishful Baton and Weakness Policy. I feel like if we're going to play them, we're going to play one of them, not both of them.
Yeah, I agree. They're obviously both really strong inclusions because we're playing the Green's Exploration build, but I do agree that it's probably a one or the other kind of decision.
Yeah, if at all.
I don't think we need to fit a third choice band because a lot of the matchups you don't need choice band at all, such as Zoroark. You're already doing enough damage. You only need it for that GX attack turn, so I don't think we need to consider bumping that up anytime soon. But overall, one of those 2 tools I think has to go. I've got to say, I think I'm leaning towards Weakness Policy being the better one overall. What do you think?
Well, I was actually gonna go the exact opposite way.
Because
Wishful Baton for me means that Turtonator is more potent, which in turn means that Flareon is more potent. So it depends on whether we want to be more aggressive or more defensive. Weakness Policy is by far the better defensive item. Like, if we're expecting to see lots of water, then Weakness Policy, yep, 100% included. But if we just want to be attacking every turn, which is what I feel that this deck wants to do, then maybe Wishful Baton's the right way to go, because if we get knocked out, then we're not losing all of the attachments that we had. That's my reasoning.
Yeah, I agree with that logic, actually. With the Turtonator, the Wishful Baton gets a lot more value, and obviously it means that your Flareon GX attack might take 1 extra turn to get to full power, but you can always retreat if you need to rush to get those early GX knockouts anyway, so the Wishful Baton, I think, Weakness Policy is probably just more of a tech for certain matchups. If you're expecting lots of Quagsire, it's probably not a bad card to play, but honestly, are you going to beat Quagsire even with a 1 of Weakness Policy? Maybe not.
Maybe not. That's going to be a tough one. I'm happy to go either way.
Let's keep the Wishful Baton for now. I think that's a pretty strong card.
Let's do that. And since there's not a lot of choice band, not a lot of field blowers going around at the moment, so Wishful Baton will see some value. What else have we got? We've got some thick support lines. We've got lots of energy. And at the moment, this is where it's starting to get a little bit harder because we do need to make some cuts somewhere. And I'm looking at these 4 Fire Crystal. That's jumping out at me as a high count without Salazzle.
I would say both the Fire Crystal and the Fiery Flint are both cards that I think can easily work as 3-ofs, especially since we can search them out with Green's Exploration at any time.
And since we have such a high energy count, maybe Fiery Flint could go down to a 3-of, because as long as we've got some, we should be okay. But I'm 100% certain that we go down to 3 Fire Crystal. I think if you've played 4 Fire Crystal, then something's gone horribly wrong.
Yeah, I think all 3 of those cards, honestly, are pretty cuttable. Cutting both a Fire Energy, a Fiery Flint, and a Fire Crystal. I think we've still got so many ways to use energy over and over again. I mean, I can see an argument for keeping 4 Fiery Flint with the Flareon build. You do want to be able to have a high amount of Fire Energy in hand to use that card, but 3 is still enough to.
3 is still a good amount. Yeah, that's still a reasonable amount. All right, well, we're down to 64. We need to find 4 more cuts.
This is where it starts to get really tough, because I feel like the 2 switch, I think, is pretty necessary. I don't know if it should be 2 escape rope or 2 switch or the 1-1 split. We'd have to kind of figure that out from testing as to which one is more relevant. If I had to guess, I'd say 2 switch is probably the best, but that could change.
Yeah, that could easily change. The things that are jumping out at me, I think with 4 Poker Gear, we probably could cut down to 3 Guzma again, just because.
Yep.
It's because I don't see us using 4 of them. Obviously, it's good to have, but with the Poker Gear, we should be able to get into what we need to every turn. The other one that's jumping out at me, I'm still worried about this extra power plant. Like, I know it's good to have 3 stadiums, but I feel like we've got like that 2 power plant is going to be really good against Zoroark, but like, what else are we going to use it in? Like, it's going to turn off Zeraora's GX, Zeraora's ability. It's going to turn off
Dedene's and stuff like that.
But like, is that so valuable when we really need all of this other stuff that's accelerating? I'm not sure.
I think 1's fine. I've said it multiple times. We can use Greens to find it on the turn that we think it's going to be most valuable, and you don't really need to desperately win a stadium war with this deck. There's no stadium that you really don't like having in play. I mean, Viridian City's fine for this deck. There's a lot of stuff that you don't really care too much about. Shrine's only slightly annoying.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fine cut. Another card that I think we're probably going to end up cutting is that 3rd copy of the Volcanium we were mentioning before.
Yeah, we could go down to 2.
I think because we've got the switches and the Nest Balls and the Ultra Balls, we should be able to find it when we need it anyway.
Yep. We're down to 61, so we need to find 1 cut. The worry I have about Volcanion is obviously if you're playing against like Stall or something, like the less Volcanions you have, the more likely you are to prize all of them. That's the only thing I'm worried about, but 2 should be fine.
That is true. Another card to consider in the future could be a Rescue Stretcher. Obviously, that is dependent on what Pokemon line ends up being in the list. I think Rescue Stretcher without Salazzle probably isn't worth playing, but in a different build, Rescue Stretcher is also not a bad card to consider.
Yeah, so we're down to 1. We need 1 more card to cut.
This is the hard part. What are you thinking?
Well, I don't know. I really don't know. It's tough because like I think we're at the point now where we just go the non-negotiables. Like we need like the Pokemon line as it is. I think is now non-negotiable. We can't change that. We want the 4 green. We want the 4 welder. Choice Band and Kukui are really, really good. Poker Gear is really good. Nest Ball's really good. The Ultra Ball, we've got 2, that's fine. I really like the Stadium line. At the moment, looking at this list, there are 4 cards I think that are the highest cuttability, and those would be Max Potion, Wishful Baton, one of the Professor Kukuis, and one of the Fire Energy. I think are the 4 most cuttable cards. I think you're right. I really like the Max Potion. I want to keep that. I think that's worth keeping because it's something that might set your list apart from someone else. Like if you're going up against the mirror and you can play a card that's going to swing it that they're not expecting, that's probably pretty useful. I wouldn't mind the Wishful Baton cut. Again, it's one of those cards that would be good in the mirror, but it's got less utility than Max Potion.
It is really strong with the Turtonator, though.
It is. I don't know how I feel about the Kukui. I feel like it might be an energy. We might have to go down to 13 energy.
I think it might be the Kukui, actually, because I'm just thinking about the matchups that Kukui is useful in. I feel like if you pull off the 1 Kukui at the right time, that's all it really needs to do. Like, if you ever need to use Kukui twice in one game, that's probably, like, a bad spot anyway. You can probably salvage getting away with playing only the 1 most games, and it does make it slightly harder to find.
And here's another thing. If we are playing in the mirror, if we have a Wishful Baton on a ReshiZard, maybe, then we can more easily get our GX attack to do 300, so we can get a 1-shot there. Then we can get another 1-shot with Turtonator with Wishful Baton more easily. And that's the reason we've got Kukui in there, is for that mirror.
Yeah. Obviously, it's kind of tough when you can't use Choice Band on the Reshiram with the weakness, with the Wishful Baton, so that kind of takes away some of the value of Kukui being only useful while you've got the Choice Band.
Yeah, I reckon if we it comes down to me now. I reckon we cut one of the 2. So it just depends what we're trying to do. I think the Wishful Baton with Turtonator is really powerful, and it's something that we're gonna, if we can pull it off, that'll swing lots of games for us. Whereas Kukui is only really useful in the mirror. The problem is that the mirror is probably the most important game to be able to win. But does Max Potion do enough for us in that? I think like maybe it does.
There are some other matchups that the Kukui is kind of useful in. For example, it does allow Volcanion to take knockouts on some of the cards we were talking about earlier, or any of like the 130 HP basic Pokemon, which there are quite a lot of.
Yep.
So it's got value there as well. So it's not completely dead card, but obviously not quite as useful as Wishful Baton in some of the matchups that's useful in.
Yeah, it's kind of, we're looking at it 2 different ways. Like if you want to beat more GX decks, I reckon your Wishful Baton's the better choice. But if you're going for more, I reckon a more rounded list is going to have 2 Kukui. I'm happy to cut the Baton at this point. I've kind of talked myself into cutting it.
Yep, I think that's a fine place to start and try out the list of the 2 Kukui, see how relevant it is in a lot of the matchups, and see which matchups it ends up swinging.
Beautiful. Alright, so that's a list. We've got 60 cards. It's by no means the perfect 60 cards. But this process is kind of, it's shown you the way that we kind of go about thinking about it. Well, what we're going to do is we'll end the video pretty soon, because we've been going for like 35 minutes talking about this deck and the process of building it. The next video we do, we might just jump on the ladder, Jordan, and have a couple of games with this, just to see how it works, and then talk about some of the cuts and changes we might make afterwards, just depending on what we see and what kind of matchups we have. What do you reckon?
Yeah, it sounds good to me, but I think this is definitely a good starting point to try out a lot of these texts and see which ones are worth playing and which ones aren't.
Beautiful. Well, thanks very much, Jordan, for coming along with this one. It's been great to have you back on the channel after you've been away for a bit.
No problem.
And thanks everyone for watching. If you like this kind of content, please give us a like, comment, or a subscribe. You can do that by clicking the little Sableye in the middle of the screen. Hit the subscribe button. On the left-hand side, you'll see a video that YouTube thinks that you might like. And on the right-hand side, you'll see our new Unbroken Bonds playlist, where we've got actual deck profiles and stuff coming soon. So at the moment, it's pretty empty, but you'll see some more later. Thanks, Jordan, for coming along. And thanks everyone for staying with the Sableyes. And we'll see you for more next time. Reshiram Charizard coming your way. See you then. Bye.